Hi, this is Aaron from Inside the Skev. I hope you enjoy this next episode. If you want to listen live, tune in Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. to WCGO. That's 95.9 FM, 1590 AM, or WCGOradio.com. Facebook Live at WCGO's page and Inside the Skev. To learn more about this great town and what I do, go to Skevanston.com. And you could always contact me at aaron@skevanston.com. Now sit back and listen to this one message from one of our supporters, and we'll start the show.
Mortgage rates have reached record lows recently. If you see homeownership in your future, the future is now. Think of Beth Lewis at Cross Country Mortgage as your personal mortgage shopper. She'll sort through racks and racks of home financing options until she finds exactly the right style and fit for you. She'll get you pre-approved to give you an advantage over other buyers, and she'll close your loan quickly with a highly efficient process driven by advanced mortgage technology. In 2020, Beth closed over $294 million in loans in 883 separate transactions. Beth will be here for you too, because helping people get mortgages is what she does best. Visit BethLewisTeam.com to get started. That's BethLewisTeam.com or call 847-274-9745. That's 847-274-9745. Cross Country Mortgage LLC, NMLS 3029, www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. Equal housing opportunity. Illinois Residential Mortgage Licensee.
Welcome, everyone, to Inside the Skev. I'm your host, Aaron Masliansky. Today, I'm excited to speak with Alecia Wartowski. Alecia is the executive director of Foundation65, which is an organization that is an independent grant-making organization that invests in educator-led initiatives to support educational equity through literacy and arts in the child's foundational years. So we're going to talk about its mission, its role during the pandemic, and vision for the future. Couldn't think of a more important time to have an organization like this with what's been going on with the pandemic and children not being able to be in person, although for the past few weeks, District 65 has been open. So it's very, very important. But Alecia, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure. So, tell us a little bit about, the foundation. Why was it started and when?
Sure. So the foundation started over a decade ago, and I think it was a bunch of parents kind of sitting around the kitchen table saying, how can we better support our public schools in Evanston, knowing that that is a huge value of ours. So the founder really was a woman by the name of Patty Barbado, who is still a force here in our Evanston community. And she started doing it on her own. And she started raising a little bit of money and trying to invest in arts and literacy in the district. And over time, sort of people began to join her. And one of the first major funders of the foundation was the Lewis Sebring Foundation, who said, like, what if we really started to invest some money and, over time we could build up an executive director position and this could become a full-scale organization. And Lisa Gino was the first full-time executive director, and she led the organization for over 8 years until I came on, and I've been in my role for a little over 2 years. And I feel so fortunate. Lisa took, I think, the foundation from what Patty had created in her, spare time as a volunteer into a full-fledged running organization with a benefit and a donor list and a mission and all of that. And I've just been able to build off of that foundation that she started.
And how did you get into this field? Because you have a pretty incredible background. I was reading about you. You're a former All-American swimmer. You're in the Hall of Fame for University of Michigan. So how does this lead you into this field?
Sure. So I've always been really interested in supporting and advocating for kids. And so although if you look at my resume, it feels like it wanders, in my mind, it always makes sense. I started off being interested in advocating for girls because of my experience as a student athlete, as a swimmer at Michigan and growing up. And as happens sometimes in your first job, I had my master's in education focused on girls development. I started working at the Girl Scouts and they said, can you run a program for girls whose moms are in prison? And I was like, ooh, that is not what I expected to do. And it truly changed my life. So I started working with these girls and families that I had as a nice middle-class white girl living in suburbia, about an hour and a half in New York City, had no experience with. And it changed my life. And I started to want to become an advocate for girls. I went to law school eventually to have another tool to advocate for kids. And then I ended up at Northwestern at the Women's Center, where I really started to focus my lens around racial justice in addition to gender equity, which had been part. And when the position came up to do this work with the school district and supporting it, I saw the idea of sort of funding, giving foundation money towards equity related work in the district to be very close to my heart and being able to support kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you have the tool set and obviously it's really, I think, making a lot of progress within the organization because of the work that you're doing. What do you see as why is it so important for Evanston children to have this foundation? I mean, if somebody asks, doesn't the district provide a lot of these things already? What do you say to that?
So I think that the district does a great job with the resources it has. I think one thing that we don't always realize is that the amount of money we have per pupil for District 65, our K-8 district, I think is $14,000 or $15,000 per student, whereas for the high school, it's $19,000 or $20,000 per student. Now, a lot of that is in salaries. It costs a lot more to pay a high school teacher than it does a kindergarten teacher. And we could get into a whole analysis of gender as to why that's true. But the high school is supporting one building. The District 65 is supporting, 18 buildings or so. So clearly there's a funding differential. But I think especially when we look at the challenge that has plagued Evanston for generations, which is racialized educational disparities. White children in Evanston are, according to Sean Reardon's research, and he's a researcher out of Stanford, are the highest achieving of any school district in the nation. And Black children are 4 grades behind. And so when you think about that, what I think about is what can money do to address that disparity? And I think that can be really a driving force of the foundation and thinking about how can we support our educators in addressing a challenge that is not just an Evanston challenge, right? This is a US challenge. This is a national challenge, but how can we really support our educators in addressing those disparities so that something like that doesn't happen and we can get rid of it?
Has it been exciting for you to work with Dr. Horton? I had him on the show a few weeks ago, and obviously I think his mission aligns very much so with the foundation's.
Yeah, so I think it's so exciting. I have to say, as a foundation, we've mostly said, we know you have a lot on your plate. And so just only even the past few months have we been connected a little bit more with him. And, mostly I didn't want to get in his way. I knew he was juggling about 10 balls, none of which had been done before. But as he starts to roll out things like his teacher residency program, and obviously he's been just a really strong advocate around equity, I think there's going to be a lot of really natural collaboration points as we go forward.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that there's a lot of collaboration points. Some of the things I want to know about are some of the programming that you guys run and how you collaborate with the schools. How does that work?
Yeah, so I think one thing I love about my board is that there are current and former educators. So there are some District 202 ETHS educators. We have an educator from District 219. We don't have any District 65 educators. But because we have educators, they are very clear that we are not going to go tell teachers how to do their job. And we have the children of educators. We have a board member who's my dad was a superintendent. If I learned anything, it's that I, as a community member, am not going to go tell a 25-year teaching veteran how to do their job. What we believe in doing is empowering educators and giving them the funds to do what they need to do. And so that has been exciting. And we know that we need to have a strong collaboration with the district. And so that is from the top, from meeting regularly with Dr. Horton to a really strong relationship that I have with Dr. Elizabeth Cardenas Lopez, who's the director of literacy. And she and I talk regularly about what sort of support to empowering classroom level teachers to say, do you have that idea that you've always wanted to do and you don't need a whole lot of money to do it? Or have you already been doing it and you've been paying out of pocket? That's what we want to support you to be able to do.
Do teachers pay out of pocket in order to be able to do some of the programs that they want to do with their students?
Of course, teachers are constantly paying out of pocket. When you go into a classroom and you kind of look around and see the things that they're doing, they're often paying out of pocket. There's even tax deductions. I was reading something the other day, you can deduct $250 as an educator every year just for the money that you're paying out of pocket to support your classroom and the work that you do as an educator. So it depends on the school district. Some of them you're buying your own staplers. Some of them you're supplementing with books. Some of them you're buying, the treats and incentives for your reward charts. But, the teachers have a very small budget from the districts. And this is, I think, nationally how it works. So they're often reaching into their own pockets to be able to support what they do. So if they're like, I want to do this new initiative, that's often coming out of their own pockets. It's rare that they have support. Maybe they can do a GoFundMe for those. Maybe the PTA can support those, but we see the work we do in Foundation 65 as being a very clear way in being able to support those initiatives and dreams.
Yeah, that seems kind of messed up, though, that teachers have to do that. And
yeah, exactly.
I mean, it would make sense that I know that budgets are tight, but it looks like, Evanston's going to get a good amount of money from the stimulus bill that just passed, stimulus law. So hopefully there's a way to use some of those funds to help with education, because I know a lot of it's for economic development, which we need. And, you need businesses to be able to thrive, and then that pays your tax base. But having a good educational system and not having to be in a deficit type of situation or cut classes or cut the funding that teachers need would really make it a lot easier for people to have a great education. It's a selling point for the community. And, hopefully that will help replenish some of these funds, if that's possible. But yeah. I mean, how do you raise funds for, what's your annual budget?
Yeah. So last year we were able to raise about $450,000. And we budgeted to give away a little over $200,000. And so we raise our money in a bunch of different ways. We do a fall appeal. So we send out letters to donors and potential donors just saying, can you support the work that we do? We do an annual benefit. In the past, it's been called My 65, and it's a big in-person 300 plus per event that is much more casual, I think, than many events. It's, like kind of barbecue and open bar and dancing, as opposed to round tables and chicken in a ballroom. This year, we shifted to doing 2 virtual tastings. So we did a chocolate tasting with local vendor Noir de Ben, and then a wine tasting with local vendor The Wine Goddess. So that's a big chunk of our giving. And then in the spring, and we're starting to gear up for this, we do Honor a Teacher events. And so that is during Teacher Appreciation Week, which is the first week in May. And it allows parents or community members to just say thank you to a teacher that they feel like has done a lot. And so they make a donation, and then the teacher gets a card saying, like, Erin made a donation in your name and just wanted to tell you that you're doing a great job. Keep it up. So we just try to give teachers a little bit of light to show them that they're being recognized.
Oh, that's pretty beautiful that you do that. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to get a little bit more into the meat of the work that you do and some of the programs that are programmed through the foundation. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Reading, writing, and math are a struggle for a lot of students. At BrainLinks, we know those skills are what paves the way to independence and success. Our specialists will help your child develop the habits they need to make sure they thrive not only in class, but out in the world in general. And of course, for everyone's safety, our lessons are done completely online. For more information on our team members and to schedule your initial consultation, visit BrainLinksAcademics.com. That's BrainLinksAcademics.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Inside the Skev. We're speaking with Alecia Wartowski, the Executive Director of Foundation 65. And we were just talking a little bit about some of the programming that the foundation puts on, because foundation really supplements a lot of what the district does and coordinates and works a lot together with them. But Alecia, what are some of the examples of the literacy and art programs that you put on?
Sure. So we have 3 levels of funding that we do every year. The first level is our strategic grants, and those are often in collaboration with district administrators. And I'll tell you about that in a second. Then we have engagement grants. Those often reach across the district. And then we have change agent grants, which are really educator, teacher, classroom-led grants. So I'll give you an example of each one. So at the strategic level this year, we've been really excited to support an initiative where we're supporting classroom educators to get their master's in reading or their literacy endorsement. And so that means that they are building their skills within a classroom and within their grade level team to become experts in teaching reading. If you talk to an educator, they might tell you like, oh yeah, when I was an undergrad or when I was in graduate school, I took one class on how to teach kids to read. And we all know how important it is that like that's most of what you're doing, especially in that K-2 space. So now we're empowering educators to bring a whole lot of extra skills, even beyond what they would get in professional development. And our engagement grants right now, one of the things we're really proud of is our Black Girl Magic Book Club. And that was started by two educators who are also District 65 alumni and Black women who said, we want to take the principles of Black Lives Matter movement and we want to align them with books that we can have kids read in 3rd through 5th grade. They started at Walker Elementary School. They've expanded to Lincolnwood and Oakton, and the kids are part of an after-school book club, but it is kids across race and across gender, so that kids are seeing windows and mirrors to elevate and humanize Black girls and women. And then we have our change agent grants, and those are, over time at every single school in the district. And so one program we've been excited about there is at Washington Elementary School for the TWE program, a two-way immersion program. They've done a kindergarten Latinx literacy program. So they've actually engaged parents who are native Spanish speakers in like, what are some strategies that you can use to support your children as they start to read, and especially as they're moving in this bilingual space. Mm-hmm. So every year we just get these amazing program ideas from our educators, and our job is just to give them the funding to give them life.
It's great that you're able to help make those ideas happen. Do you work with children of all ages, or is it just elementary school, or how does that work?
Sure. No, our funding is from kindergarten through 8th grade. And actually, increasingly, we're starting to look at how can we help pre-K kids, those who are at JEH, which is the early childhood program. So we go the entire kind of gamut, knowing that, some of the most important literacy years are in pre-K through 2nd grade, where kids are really learning how to read. And that there's some really important stuff that goes on in middle school to get kids prepared for high school and to build up skills and engagement as they get ready to move on.
Yeah. No, literacy is so important. My wife is a reading specialist, and I know that she works with a lot of people children who have difficulty with reading, but once you can unlock that power of being able to read and comprehend, it changes your life. Mm-hmm. And I think that by providing that spark for children at a young age, it gives them the confidence to be able to do anything as they move on. So, is that kind of the idea behind it, to kind of, if you have this disparity in grades, do you think that it's because there's been a lack of the educational focus with Black and brown children before, or what do you think has been causing the disparity?
Sure. So that's like, the $100 million question, right? And so I don't think we have all the answers to that. I think that there are a lot of possibilities in the answers. So I think one of them is that simply that public education was built for white middle and upper middle class kids, right? Like it was founded on the premise of supporting kind of a certain class and group of kids to go through. And so everything that's been done since that has been kind of retooling something that already existed. And in fact, like there have been distinct efforts to stop Black folks from learning to read from all the way back in slavery times. There were punishments, from fines to death if you taught Black folks to read. Wow. And so if we look at the history of our nation, we're one of the few nations, kind of industrialized nations, with such a low literacy rate. There are a lot of countries out there that have 100% literacy rate if you look out there. And granted, I don't know what, everybody uses their own scale to determine what literacy is. But in the US, it's, 75 or 80% of people kind of like have a kind of a full literacy understanding by the time they leave our school system. So I think there's a deeply embedded piece of race and racism in our school systems as in our country. I also think that there's some access issues. And the access comes from a bunch of different places. So it might be that I have the access to buy my 3-year-old, shelves and shelves of books. And I can go to the library when the library is open because that's not during my work, because it's not interrupting my work hours, or I can arrange my time. that I have the time to teach my child to read every evening because I am not kind of going off to my second job then, that I can put my child in a high quality preschool, right? So my child is coming into the school systems a little bit ahead. Although even in District 65, what you'll see is there's a gap when kids start and the gap widens as we continue on. So then you look at things like who is reflected in the books that we're reading. There is a young woman by the name of Marley Diaz who decided several years ago, she realized that there were more books about white boys and their dog than there were about Black girls. And so she started a Twitter campaign. I think she was in middle school to say, like, I want to find 1,000 books about Black girls. And then people just started sending her, tweeting at her books. And she started to create and cultivate like a library that people could use. So how are we showing kids books that reflect people who look like them and who have lived experiences like them? So I think there's a million different pieces that go into it. And I think what we see is how can we elevate the voices of those who are like, hey, I think I might have a piece of that puzzle that I can insert here to try to untangle some things.
Yeah. No, it's key. It's giving people the right, positive role models and changing the narrative in many different respects and engaging everybody, I think. Well, we're going to take another short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about how the pandemic has affected the work that the foundation does and, shifted even how you've done your fundraising, which you've brought up a little bit before, but, it's very creative. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Moving day is a happy day, but how can you be sure all of your stuff will get to the new place in the same condition they left the old place? Upgrade your experience to First Class Moving and Storage. You'll get a team of professionals who treat all of your belongings with care and have the right tools to make the job go smoothly. They even offer a full packing service. Upgrade to First Class Moving and Storage. They're local and independently owned. For more info, visit the website at firstclassmovers.com. That's the number 1, stclassmovers.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Inside the Skev here with Alecia Wartowski, and we've been talking about Foundation65, which she is the executive director of. And what a year to be executive director of an educational foundation. My God, what's it been like during the pandemic?
I think it has been, very scary at times and in a bunch of different ways. I think when COVID first hit, there was a holy cow, is every nonprofit in the country going to go down? And then this community stepped up. I have to say that, I have to be so thankful for the ways in which our community members, when we put out asks, and I would say they were very soft asks, we said, this is what we're doing. Our board sat down and said, what do we need to do in this moment that's not budgeted for, knowing that we have no idea if we're going to bring in any money next year, but we have major donors that work with us every year. And they gave us a little bit of financial stability so that we could say, okay, let's do some investments. And so we did things like we helped support the purchase of 200 Chromebooks last spring. Right around now, there was this realization as we went into spring break that there were kids who didn't have devices and that we were not going to go back for a while. And this is before the district made the commitment to buy Chromebooks for every kid who needed one this fall. So we worked with the Evanston Community Foundation, the PTA Equity Group, and we purchased 200 Chromebooks. Principals were able to say what they needed, and we got them out the door. We helped contributed to PTA Equity, asked different PTAs to look in their reserves and to contribute money that could go out in the form of, gift cards for families that were struggling to take care of basic things like food. And then we got as many books out the door as we could. And so when the board committed to that, we just shared an announcement of what we were doing, and people started to send in money and say, thank you for doing this. Please, can you make sure that these kids are taken care of? And so in that sense, we've been so thankful for this community in being able to step up and give in ways that is really life-changing.
Yeah, it's really amazing how much the community comes together. I've talked to people at the Evanston Community Foundation on the show, and just other organizations where Connections for the Homeless. I mean, a lot of people really came through to help around town here. It's really incredible. And I mean, now when you look at it though, from the effects of remote schooling, some people, the children are able to really handle doing Zoom. For some, it's very, very challenging, especially people with special needs. I think it's been a lost year. So how do you think about programming for, dealing with that gap?
Yeah. So I think the immediate response we had is when we were working on our budget last spring, what we said is that we have no idea what's going to go on next week, no less in the fall. And so we usually make all of our funding decisions in May for the following year. And I advocated with the board and said, can we instead set aside an amount of money that we can kind of give out in the moment? So we created something called critical response grants. And we've had 2 cycles of saying, one was in September and one was in January, of saying, educators, if you are laying eyes on kids and there's something you need, can you please let us know and we can give you funding for it? And so we've given out a whole bunch of money for that. And it's really ranged because at the same time that the pandemic was going on, we've also had this racial reckoning in our country. So for example, at King Lab, they decided to do a group read with all 7th graders, I believe, of the book. This book is anti-racist. And so they said, we need all kids to be able to read that now, because that is part of this pandemic, this recognition around race in our country. We've done it with other programs around getting manipulatives into the hands of kids. And then we're thinking about what happens next year. So we're really starting to say, and educators are so tired, like, how do we create a budget next year, knowing that when more kids are back in person and teachers are laying eyes on them in a different way, what are they going to need to give them some of those foundational skills? I mean, I think there should be some recognition that, like, everybody in the world is losing some element of schooling for this year. Nobody's school was normal.
No.
So it's not that some kids had a completely normal existence this year and some kids didn't. And there are huge disparities, I think, based on race and income, that we're going to have to really double down and address and be really thoughtful around how do we live as a collective.
Yeah, I mean, and for some, people have been able to stay home, so it's easier. But for some, kids have had to go to different places for daycare, where there's been learning pods and things like that, which in many ways could have been better for them because at least they're around their peers. But on the other hand, there's, the risk of getting sick. What do you think in terms of, maybe this is something the foundation will have nothing to do with, but in terms of helping get vaccines out to children, I mean, will there be some kind of piece involving the foundation with that, do you believe?
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that at all. I think that if we were approached by the community in some way, and whether that's a place like Evanston Community Foundation, which under Monique Jones's leadership just did incredible things over the last year, or it's through the city or local health department, we would be happy to participate in any way that we could. I think, we have to wait until there's a vaccine that's been tested on kid and is ready to go out and people are ready to kind of embrace that. But whether that would be in some sort of marketing and social media campaign, we would definitely, I think, get involved with that, to, within reason, anything that others asked us to do.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important because I think that, the anti-vax movement, definitely has focused a lot on children and coming up with different, conspiracy theories about what can happen. This might be controversial to say, but so be it. And I think that it's going to be important for these organizations to endorse to endorse children getting vaccinated, because that's the missing link of what's going to be. Everyone's so excited by, May 1st, everyone's going to be able to get a shot, but that's not everybody. There's a lot of children in this country. No one
under 18.
Right. And I think, if you want to talk about, regular schooling, being back in person, even today I think it was on the New York Times website, or maybe it was in the Sunday paper, talking about the lost year of after school, the time between school ending and dinner time, and all the programming, and say YOU or other types of, sports or whatever it might be that kids normally would do for after school. And that's a lost thing, but we need to be able to get back to that. I mean, is that something you guys are you involved in any type of after school programming, coordinating with the district?
So we do, through our change agent grant, sometimes support organizations that are working with the district to do work in before and after school spaces. So over the years, we've supported Books and Breakfast as it's rolled out to some of our different schools. We have supported bringing in maybe teaching artists to work in an after school space. I don't know if we've directly given to a place like YOU or Metro Squash or, a place like that. We do try to work really significantly with the school district. And, we continue to sort of firmly say, like, you have to have a relationship with the school district in order for us to support you, because we know that educators have no other route to get money, whereas nonprofits, like, there's lots of different funding sources that they could go to kind of support the work that they're doing.
Yeah. And to talk about that with fundraising, were the virtual events that you put on, the chocolate tasting and the wine tasting, were they comparable in terms of how many the net dollars that you brought into something that you would have done in person?
So it was less, which we're not totally surprised by, but we were pleasantly surprised by how much we were able to bring in, over $100,000. Which was exciting, but I will tell you that we made over $150,000 our last 2 years for in-person benefits. So I think we need to look at, like, well, how are we thinking about kind of making up that money, and how are we thinking about moving forward? Because I'm not convinced that we're going to be able to have a 300-person in-person event next January. So do we do 2 events? We're 1.5 person staff. So it's me and a part-time office manager. So putting on, multiple major benefits a year is a pretty heavy lift. But I think we have to think about what that looks like, because I think our benefit is a huge source of revenue for us every year.
Yeah. Do you foresee doing a type of like a hybrid?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And there was something that really resonated with people in doing the chocolate tasting, because they could do it with their kids. And so I think that we could think about, especially given that we are an education-based foundation, is there something that people might want to do with their kids to do in a benefit sense? I would say the one thing that the virtual benefit did this year in an amazing way was really expanded our base of people who knew about Foundation 65. We've had more new donors this year than in any previous year. And so that's new people being exposed to the foundation, learning about it, and hopefully understanding our mission and feeling like they buy into it.
Yeah. Well, I could just foresee some type of event, maybe even this summer, where you do another wine tasting or chocolate tasting or something like that with some of the Evanston or Skokie businesses, and do it outdoor. I think that there's a hunger for people to get together. And, if everyone who's there is vaccinated and it's outside, it's probably, no risk really at that point. And, get some people a little get some drinks in them, and maybe put some more money into the foundation's pockets. Wouldn't be a bad thing.
I think that definitely helps with the giving. And the chocolate tasting, people maybe were not as loose with their wallets during the ask part, because, we weren't a few drinks in.
Exactly. You got to get them in there. But I see a lot of interesting types of things. And, what the challenge of the pandemic has done is it's forced people to be creative with how they go about things and how they fundraise and how you do your programming. So I'm excited to see what you guys put on.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I think when I think from an educational justice standpoint, those who have been in the justice world have often said that in order for us to work towards real justice, we kind of have to knock over the table, and we have to start over in a lot of ways. Well, I feel like the pandemic knocked over the table, and then the murder of George Floyd kicked a bunch of the pieces under the rug. And so we really have this opportunity to start to rebuild our educational systems in ways that I don't think we would have imagined possible 2 years ago. What my hope is...
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're going to go to break. We'll be right back in just a couple minutes, and stick around.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Aaron Masliansky, longtime Skokie and Evanston resident, host of Inside the Skev, and local real estate expert. As a community connector and realtor with Dreamtown Realty in downtown Evanston, I know firsthand what makes the Skev such an amazing place to live. When I'm helping my clients buy and sell properties inside of the Skev or out, I'm doing it with the best technology and support team behind me at Dreamtown. During the pandemic, I've been able to help my clients seamlessly stay on track with their home search. From immersive 3D Matterport tours, professional photos, to virtual open houses, my clients can find their homes safely and comfortably, and even from their couch. When you're ready to make a move, know that I'll be here to help. You can always find out more about me at skevanston.com/real estate. Again, that's skevanston.com/real estate, or email me at aaron@skevanston.com. Welcome back, everyone. This is Inside the Skev, and we've been talking this past hour with Alecia Wartowski from the Foundation65, and we've talked a lot about the different programming that they put on and how they've adapted for the period that we've been in. And, I want to look at the future a little bit about, what you're thinking, Alecia, it's going to look, let's say 5 years from now. Where do you think education in Evanston is going to be from the work that you guys are doing?
Well, as we talked about earlier, we're so excited about Dr. Horton and his vision and his deep racial consciousness. And I think that is going to make an impact. I also think the Evanston community has been doing their own work. And I think each of us needs to challenge ourselves to say, what do we see the purpose of public education to be? How do we better connect to our humanity? Is that part of what it is? It's not just about me getting my kid into the best college out there. It's about them being a human being and being in a relationship with others. And so I see some real potential for change and transformation. Every once in a while, I'll ask somebody who grew up in Evanston, and I'll be like, are we having the same conversation or a different one than you had when you were growing up? And I do think some are saying this feels different, even though we've been kind of grappling with the same things. And so I think the foundation is here to be nimble and to really support stuff that's working in the evolution. And we're just excited to be a part of it.
Yeah. Do you think that these programs, they're going to bring the gap, to close the gap, I should say?
That's what I'm hoping. I think there are educators within District 65 who are starting to see signs of things like, hey, I think that we're seeing things that are different. I think there are educators who are like, oh, I never realized that before. This is what I could do differently. And that humbleness and that willingness to continue to learn as an educator, which I think is a grounding of why you become an educator, that leads to differences. And so then we're just here to say well, what do you need to do that now that you've had these different understandings? How can we help? Yeah. So I'm hopeful. I'm relentlessly optimistic.
You need to be. I think one of the things is that this past year has done for a lot of people is made people turn inward and kind of examine yourself. And there's a whole big push for meditation, mindfulness, and everything. And it's really about turning the lens and looking in the mirror and kind of understanding where can we make improvements. So I think that in itself, I think, will be helpful and maybe just help everybody with education within the district. So do you see, though, that the foundation will grow? Do you expect to be more than 1.5 people in a few years from now?
I think we hope so. We are really fortunate to have some amazing, brilliant board members who are doing a lot of thinking about what does our communication strategy look like? What does our donor base look like? How do we roll ourselves out? If there's 8,000 kids in District 65, how do we work with more of those families to support? How do we support people who don't have a child in District 65, seeing why strong public education in Evanston is good for them too? It helps the people that they're hiring. It helps their property values. It helps just make us a stronger community. So I think we're hoping to grow. I don't see a school foundation ever being a 15-person thing. We're not going to, rival Evanston Community Foundation, but I think that we can grow bigger, and I think we can increase our impact.
Definitely. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for you guys there. You talk about the board, and the board has been really great in coming up with different ideas. How do people get involved here if they want to, be participating and then maybe at some point be on the board?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we always have opportunities for volunteers to get involved. I think one of the best ways for people to get involved is in helping in planning our benefit. And especially if you are someone who is creative and likes to think out of the box. We have Now in the 2.5 years that I've been here, we have done 3 completely different benefits. So every year we're needing to evolve it. And next year is probably going to be a different benefit in itself. So if you're someone who is creative and is like, hey, I think maybe we could do this, like we need you on our planning committee, and we send out an email in the fall, probably in August or September, and you can go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, and then you're going to get that information. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. That information will be out there. We sometimes have opportunities to do something like be on board development, to think about who good board members will be, to just sit down and have coffee, virtual or in person, with me or one of my board members to just learn more. And we're really just interested in getting perspectives from all Evanstonians. I think, sometimes we are best at talking to people who are most like us. And so I am most interested in talking to somebody who is completely unlike me, because then I can learn their perspective and bring that into the work of the foundation.
That's important. And what is that website that people should go to?
Sure. It's just foundation65, the numbers.org.
Okay. And then that's the same thing as well on social media.
Yes.
Yeah. And have you gotten to meet a lot of different people that you would never have met over the course of the year, even with things being virtual?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's amazing who is willing to have a conversation and who is able to talk. And even some work that I did with a colleague last fall around educational justice, we just pulled in a really diverse group of people who were committed to education in Evanston and said, let's think about what educational justice looks like here. And so getting to know them on a much more personal basis and to being able to do some really good work around kind of connection and perspective building was powerful, and built relationships that I didn't have before.
Yeah, I mean, did you kind of think a year ago, like, oh my God, like everything's going to be stopped? That like, how am I actually going to do this? And then it just completely, surprised you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that like my work has changed, but in really good ways, because you start to realize like, how do I want to spend my time? Where do I want to invest those things? How do I be really clear? Because I think there would be days that you could doom scroll all day and get nothing done, right?
Sure.
And you needed to say like, what do I have control over that I can make an impact on?
Yeah, I think that's the key. And I think that it's great that there's this organization, Foundation 65, where you could, and community members can put those efforts in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say, like, I will have coffee with anyone. Like, I have had people connected with me because they want to talk about the reading curriculum, and I am not a reading specialist, and that is not my expertise. And I can think through and understand what somebody has to say about the reading curriculum. I have people who are like, well, can I talk to you about this piece of art? Can I talk to you about this that's going on in the district? Can I share my perspective? Like, yes. Like, let me be a vessel to be able to take all of those in, because then I can have conversations with others and share that perspective.
No, that's so important. So again, foundation65.org, and you are on social media, Foundation65 on Facebook and LinkedIn?
Instagram and LinkedIn, yes.
Instagram, okay. And you guys always are posting updates about what's going on, your different programs. I mean, definitely do the chocolate and wine again. I think that's...
Okay, we will do more chocolate and wine.
Yeah, who doesn't like chocolate and wine? And do it in person when you can.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, Alecia, I love what you're doing. I appreciate you coming on the show today. You're welcome. And, I think it's just great to share the different types of things that community members are doing around town. And, and it really illustrates how much people are committed to making sure that the future of this community is bright. And, I think that it's important to support Foundation 65. And for those who want to check out more, go to Skevanston.com. I've got all the previous episodes there and more information. But thanks for listening. Have a great Sunday. See you next week.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of Inside the Skev. To listen live, tune in Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. to WCGO. That's 95.9 FM, 1590 AM, WCGOradio.com, or you can go to Facebook Live on WCGO's page or Inside the Skev. If you want to learn more about this great neighborhood or what I do, go to Skevanston.com. And I want to thank every supporter of the show and all my listeners. Thanks so much.